Welcome back, or welcome to the Rebel Tech Podcast. I'm your host today, David Dunmoyer, shooting live from the Texas Policy Summit 2025 at the AT&T Conference Center. And these are fun because we get a chance to see a lot of folks from across the country that we normally don't interact with on a daily basis. And today we've got none other than Brett Tolman, who is a colleague, a partner in crime, who works and oversees our entire Right on Crime department. Don't always get a chance to see him. So Brett, so glad to see you in Austin, Texas.
Thank you, David. It's great to be with you.
Well, we're going to get into a lot of discussion on surveillance, data-driven policing, and so on. Before we jump in, for our listeners, you've got a very illustrious background. We probably even take 20 minutes to get through all the things you've done. but what are some of the highlights from your career that have kind of opened your eyes on the surveillance state and what's happened between tech and criminal justice?
Sure. I spent about a decade as a federal prosecutor. I wouldn't think that, when I was doing that, tech was not that big of a deal. I mean, we were dealing with, there was some surveillance. We did not have what we have today. There was no AI. There was no concern about some of the power of surveillance back then. It was really in its infancy. Then I left and I went and joined the Senate, and I was chief counsel over crime and terrorism in the United States Senate. And 9/11 happened. And then I was put in charge of what is called the Patriot Act and authorization of the Patriot Act. And that was where I quickly learned that the effort after 9/11 was universally in Washington, D.C., was to expand the surveillance power and sacrifice, without much thought, to sacrifice personal liberty. And it was an avalanche of people. I remember Jim Comey coming in. He at the time was the Deputy Attorney General. And he came up to the Hill and he promised us that if we would grant him greater power to surveil in order to root out terrorism, to root out national security issues, it would never be used against U.S. citizens. And now fast forward, here we are. And, we're well informed now of the abuse. Hundreds of thousands of individuals have been unlawfully surveilled, and millions of data points have been collected by our intelligence agencies through the use of surveillance. So it's a big issue. I'm very passionate about it, and I hope that we can rein in government. It's part of what needs to be reined in.
Yeah, no, amen. Could not agree more. And I actually didn't realize that was the time that you're overseeing that division and department. So, we talk about in our research and analysis that, 2001 is the impetus for government issued surveillance, let's say for national security purposes. Then 2008 onwards, when you start to see the whole data collection apparatus from the private sector companies. And so now we're in 2025. And there's been a sea change in a lot of respects. And I think there's more discussion happening nationally on data privacy, and we'll get into FISA as well. But there's this new tech right that's emerging. And whether it's Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and even Jeff Bezos and folks like that historically have either worked in concert, not Elon per se, but Zuckerberg certainly, with the federal government in that data collection regime. With the change that's happening politically, I mean, Meta has announced dramatic changes that are more freedom-loving, content moderation policies. Do you think that there is will in the private sector with some of these tech companies to start maybe focusing more on the civil liberties side and see this as a wake-up call in their own policies internally?
I'm a little more skeptical.
Okay.
I believe that these companies, these powerful companies that have the ability to surveil, if the appetite right now was to expand surveillance, they would.
Sure.
I think they are drawn to where the political winds are blowing, and they're drawn to where the money comes from. And if you look at the money, we have not been held accountable as a government. We don't see everywhere. We're seeing Doge, right now explode the accountability aspect of where money has been going, but we haven't even begun to scratch the surface in terms of how much money was utilized to expand the surveillance of U.S. citizens or to curtail our constitutional rights. However it's been intended to be used, I believe it will continue to be abused. And right now we're in a good moment, But we've got to be vigilant and put in guardrails that when we're not in a good moment and we've got others in charge and they want to start coming after us for our speech and our thoughts. And how are they going to do that? They're going to do that through surveillance. Yeah. And when that change comes, we better be ready for it.
That's right. That's right. I mean, having discussions now, and I know the administration, like, they're looking at these issues. One of the examples I think about from our testimony in Senate Criminal Justice and work with Nikki Presley and your colleagues here in Texas is these companies like Flock or Clear databases where it's personal information scraped from the entire ether of the internet, right? And part of that is automated license plate readers. They're great technology in capturing either traffickers of individuals or drugs and so on and so forth, but they can also be used for a mass surveillance system. And I think it was the CEO of one of these companies said, his vision is to have these cameras on every corner of every street. They're not mincing words. It's in the name of protecting the welfare of the population. But any comments on ALPRs and some of those technologies?
Yeah. Many, many years ago, I was briefed in classified briefings about what China was attempting to do in the United States. And what they were attempting to do was create platforms and ways in which they could spy on Americans without them knowing it. And you fast forward and you have TikTok. So TikTok comes and everybody says, what's the problem with the social media? Well, I've spoken to those who have been analyzing what China has been doing with a lot of the TikToks out there. What they're doing is they're not really caring about what's being filmed. They're caring about piecing together all of the information that they can gather from all of the videos that are being posted by millions of Americans. Now you take what the government can do and private companies can do. They're expanding that ability even beyond what the Chinese were intending to do. We now have a government that we have to be concerned, are they going to be attempting to gather the same information? And right now law enforcement wants it. They want all of it and they want to be able to use it. And it's all going to be done like after 9/11. It's all done in the interest of preserving safety, public safety, right? But it's not worth it. The cost is not worth it. The price is not worth it. Every civil liberty that we're willing to compromise for security is just growing the power of the government to surveil and to control its citizens.
Yeah. No, I think back to our friend Kevin Roberts, slightly different issue, but with autonomous vehicles, I think we all agree, hey, it's great. We see some of these technologies that are fledgling. Texas is a big hub for them. But like any of these technologies, economies of scale are necessary to have the full benefits, the full protection, the full, driver safety for autonomy. And so if in 15 years we have no steering wheels, no brakes and accelerators, well, the genie's out of the bottle. We can't bring it back. I just want to get my F-150 and drive. and I think it kind of speaks to the broader realm of tech, which is we let it silently colonize our life and it happens slowly and then all at once. And civil liberties are gone. Okay, so shifting FISA. You were here at Texas Policy Summit last year, and you moderated a discussion, I believe, on FISA. At that time, reauthorization discussions were up. I don't know that all of our listeners are aware, so can we start? What is FISA, and what is this scary apparatus that folks are talking about?
So there's a secret. They call it secret, but it's not meant to be necessarily an unknown entity, but there's a secret court. It's actually called a secret court, and it's called the FISC, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. And there is an act called the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which grants authority to DOJ and to the FBI and to the judges that sit on the FISC. It's been around for a long time. It is in its title called Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So all of its power prior to 9/11 was aimed at quickly being able to surveil foreign targets that may be in the United States and known targets. And it was very, very explicit. What happened after 9/11 was an expansion of FISA that was led by the FBI and the Department of Justice in order to expand certain provisions of FISA. I'll give you some examples. So they had one called the sneak and peek warrant. Okay. And a sneak and peek warrant is a warrant that you don't know about, and they don't have to give it to you. And it grants them the ability to go in, sneak in, and look and observe something without you knowing it, and then backing out and putting it all back. So it's a sneak and peek warrant. Now, the warrant does exist, but the problem was after 9/11, they expanded it to be indefinite. So think about how much damage you could do, right?
Right.
When it's indefinite. And people say, well, why do we care? Because if it's a foreign individual, why do we care? Well, the other thing they changed was that they could target U.S. citizens if they believed that those communications were with those foreign targets. So now all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute. Now you have U.S. citizens that are being surveilled and searched. These were actual searches without warrants.
It's that same sneak and peek for American citizens.
100%.
Yeah.
And some changes have been made, but right now the big battle is the swamp, the bureaucrats, all those with this power. They're saying, hey, don't rein this power in because it's saving the country from national security issues. And what those that are more enlightened, like Senator Lee and Senator Cruz and others that are saying, no, we're not going to expand this. You told us you weren't going to surveil citizens. You are surveilling citizens, and you can go get a warrant for all of this. That's where the fight is right now in Congress.
So then, if you were to be generous, as generous as one can, has FISA been successful in, let's say, 2% of these sneak and peeks? They find something that allows them to follow up and prosecute and bring the bad guys to justice. Is there any evidence that there has been success in these programs, not even such that it justifies the massive violation of privacy, civil liberties, and so on, but just in a vacuum?
Well, there has been success.
Okay.
There have been individuals that have been ascertained. There have been dirty bombs that have been thwarted. It's not a lot. It's not as many as you might think. And when we're talking thousands of individuals that FISA has been used, you start to question, are we as efficient and have we the appropriate guardrails in order to protect, an individual's civil liberties? And look, there's no question we need an intelligence community that is vigilant, and the FBI can be a part of that solution. But what we have seen over the last many years is an FBI that's led by individuals that are willing to put their politics in place of the fair interests of justice. Then you get targets like Donald Trump.
Right.
You get targets like anybody that supported Donald Trump.
Right.
And let me tell you about January 6th. They utilized FISA powers to investigate and ascertain who people were that came to Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Now, that is unconstitutional.
Right.
They are clearly U.S. citizens. They did it under the guise of saying this was a threat to national security, so we're going to use these extraordinary powers. And how do I know this? I represented some of them, but I had people call up and say, I just had a knock on the door by the FBI, and I'm not on social media. Nobody knew that I flew to Washington, D.C. How did they find out?
Yeah.
Well, how they found out is they utilized the power of FISA and other national security powers in order to ascertain the location, grab all of the information about what cell phones were in the area, and then going after those people. And that is absolutely a search and a seizure of and collection of evidence without a warrant.
Yeah. In that, I've seen some of the reports and the geolocation data they use in partnership with data brokers and others. One thing I'm not clear on, in Texas, we passed the Texas Data Privacy Security Act and new rights over your personal information. And there's a new class of information, sensitive information, and precise geolocation data is one of them. And ostensibly to, assuage or mollify some of these concerns. If theoretically, again, Congress passed a data privacy law that provided protections for consumers over information, would FISA still have the authority to usurp those laws and still pursue the sneak and peek and violate liberties? Is that?
Yeah, as it's currently, they would ignore everything you just, everything that you passed, everything that the guardrails you put in place in Texas. And even if the Congress were to say, we want all this data protected, right now, the rules that govern the incredible power of FISA would circumvent those.
Yeah.
It has to be a direct, amendment and to FISA.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you mentioned the FBI and their role in this. And of course, we have a new administration, new cabinet secretaries, kind of just high level, whatever, positions, or I know you're very in close contact with many of these folks. Do you see any enthusiasm or momentum to perhaps address FISA reauthorization? Any thoughts from conversations you've had there?
Pam Bondi and Kash Patel just recently confirmed today, right? They both are incredible champions of reigning in government.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to expose abuse first. They're going to try to expose all of the foundation of corruption that occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And I use the term corruption to mean using the power that the FBI and DOJ has for an illegitimate purpose. And so that first has to be exposed. But they are absolutely going to be right there in the room with members of Congress saying, we want checks on this as well. I mean, you had a lawyer lie and make up information and present it to a FISA judge, right, in order to secure information against Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they were willing to abuse it. And Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, they know that. They're going to be very helpful in reforming it.
Yeah. Well, so that's encouraging, and that really, again, sea change that's happening. I hope this renews conversations. Out of curiosity, because we're looking at a couple of solutions in Texas, whether there are laws we can pass to require warrants for local law enforcement to authorize or to use that FISA database. Is this something states can take on in the interim? Of course, the Texas legislature is in full swing. Obviously, the federal government. Let's address this root and stem. But the state level, are there any policies you've looked at or considered?
Yeah, I mean. Right now, there are multiple areas in which we give extraordinary powers to police in their ability to investigate. You look at the no-knock warrant, for example, right? So this is in essence, it was meant to be an extraordinary power for police when they knew someone's life was in danger. Mm-hmm. What has happened is we've expanded that, so now they can use it if they think that evidence might be disappearing, or if, and so we've expanded that use of the no-knock warrant, and so they can just burst into a home without serving it. And that's just an example of how states have many of these issues in which we've over years. There's been an attrition of civil liberties,
right?
And we've granted more and more power in order to secure more and more security, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So states can take a look at when do they allow action by police when there's not a warrant or otherwise. What data is being collected? How are they using extraordinary powers like facial recognition, and how are they using some of these new technologies? And we have to give them. We're behind on it.
Yeah.
How about AI? How are we handling some of the powers that the police can use? And Right on Crime is at the forefront of trying to establish good policies that balance the interest of public safety and the preservation of personal liberty.
Yeah, and that is, from the tech policy side, it's fraught. There's so many tensions you have to balance. And, shout out to Christian on your team. He's been doing yeoman's work in Florida, partnering with him on, CJ reforms in AI. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I want to give you a chance to talk again specifically about AI. When looking at transparency mechanisms or accountability tools, are there things that you guys are advocating for at the local level all the way up to the federal government? Any?
Yeah, there's so many issues on this.
I know.
If you look at right now, a defendant is entitled to receive what they call discovery, right, in a case. So a criminal case is being brought against them. There is multiple surveillances that go on and data that is gathered that right now, the big question is, what gets turned over? What is a defendant entitled to know about how they investigated him, and what information do we give them? And so just even that simple basic issue of what is a defendant entitled to receive and know about how he was investigated is become very complicated based on new techniques, AI, and all of this new technology.
Yeah, and the emphasis too on AI providing the ability to be even more like, once we have all this data that's being collected, or surveillance, video, biometrics, and so on, AI's ability to sift through it and find those themes that could be, again, totally without not under the scope of what the intent was. That's where we're seeing some concerns too. And I know Florida stepping up on this. We have Texas lawmakers who are laser focused on getting this tension right. Well, last question for you. I'll kind of just open end it. Technology and criminal justice broadly, I think it's rare that we find advocates that understand that civil liberties tension with innovation. What's your message to folks in terms of the right on crime stance on that balance? Because obviously I appreciate it and it helps substantiate our research, but for other folks, any top lines there?
Yeah, I mean, history has told us when you give power to the government, they rarely give it back. Mm-hmm. And so if the government is going to use technology, there has to be a voice that is saying, hey, hold on, wait. Because what we learned after 9/11 was we gave extraordinary expansion of power to the government, and they don't want it to be reined in. They don't want it to be controlled or eliminated. And so they're able to get conservatives to buy into continuing to expand government power. And I'd like to see elected leaders educate themselves, understand this new issue, this new problem, and I want us to reluctantly, and when in doubt, never give up a civil liberty.
Yeah. Amen. Well, Brett, thank you so much for joining us here at TPS, and look forward to continuing to monitor your work and all the great things you guys are doing right on crime. So thank you again.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on. Rebel Tech.
That's right.